Welcome to Sun, Sand, and Sold. I'm Josh Tomey, joined as always by David Haber. And before there's any outburst or outcry,
no, there is an outburst.
I am wearing a shirt that is not completely neutral, and I decided a neutral base, but this is
you outdid me today.
I've got a little bit going on, so let's just get it out of the way. Okay. Express whatever you need to express.
I'm hurt, actually, very hurt. I come in, I pick a shirt, I expect to provide shock and awe. And instead, I'm second class today.
Well, this just called my name today, and something said I needed to.
Well, you are flowery.
To take this out of the.
Of course, I'm flowery too.
We've got a floral theme going on here. And how appropriate.
Well, it's spring.
I was going to say how appropriate. We're moving very quickly. It always blows me away, Miami, because we spend the winter and we finally sort of adjust to saying, God, the weather's beautiful. It's cool. It's breezy. And then
that day is done.
And then it this week it was like, well, it's summer now.
Yeah.
So here we are.
It isn't summer, but it's getting hot summer. It's like spring was like, should have been 2.5 months, and it was about a month.
Well, here we are with Miami Music Week behind us.
Yes.
F1 in front of us. And
wait a minute. Tortuga Music Festival.
Tortuga's going on right now.
Fort Lauderdale. I went this past weekend. Shout out to my partner, Marnie Reagan, new equity partner in the firm, who turned me on to Tortuga Music Festival. It was a little jostly on Friday night, but if you stay towards the beach side with the waves and cool breeze.
Could you define jostly for me?
Young, drunk, wasted people pushing through the crowd.
That type of jostling.
That kind of jostling around, which made it a little bit unenjoyable. Although I will tell you, Jelly Roll was amazing Friday night. Keith Urban was a good and really good guitar player Saturday night. And last night they had Luke Combs, although I could not go. And here's a shout out to Tom Muska, who is Jillian Haber's boyfriend, who had his movie aired at the Miami Film Festival, which is going on right now as well through next week. And it was at the Bill Cosford Theater at the University of Miami, a psychosexual drama, which it was intense. It was good.
As advertised?
It was better than I thought it would be. It was like a real good movie. Mm-hmm. I hope it gets picked up by Netflix or HBO Latino or something like that. But I did want to, most importantly, at the beginning of our episode tonight, give a big shout out and a major prayer for the Florida Gators basketball team. Tonight is the finals of the Final Four. Shout out to UConn, Gino Auriemma, who won his 12th national title, women's basketball, breaking the tie with John Wooden, all-time great UCLA coach, who is before your time. Great story about John Wooden, told by Bill Walton that...
the late, great Bill Walton.
The late, great Bill Walton told two stories that were great. One was the first day of basketball practice. They spent the entire day practicing putting on their socks and shoes because Coach Wooden believed that if you got blisters, you were useless to the team. And he was a very disciplined man and kept in touch with most of his players over the course of their lives. Second thing was that Bill Walton had a beard in his college,
early pro days too. Portland, I recall seeing him some
but
pictures
in college, counterculture, red beard, long hair, and Coach Wooden had a thing about facial hair, no facial hair. And Bill Walton said, I'm not going to cut my beard and shave my mustache. And Coach Wooden said, well, we'll miss you, Bill.
Well, you and I would have not made a Wooden team, apparently, then.
Yeah, apparently not.
David, it's remarkable.
I wouldn't have made it because I'm, 5-foot midget,
Yes. The size and talent notwithstanding. It amazes me, David, the number of events that are now being driven through South Florida on a round the calendar basis. When I moved here 20 some years ago, there were things that were going on that were predictable. And, Art Basel found its way in relatively early in my stay here, but it is no longer just centered around the high season. It's not just snowbird culture anymore. We have these events, around the calendar. F1 interesting because it falls outside of the traditional high season in May.
Yeah.
And obviously is a massive draw now as well. And it's interesting. You've lived most of your life in Miami, and I'd be, from your perspective, how that has changed Miami, that how the year-round event culture has begun to assimilate not only within, the sort of the social trappings of South Florida, but also the way it's also impacting us economically, because we now have more of an economic round the calendar.
I think people still go away, people who can afford to go away July, August, some in September, some leave in June because they have kids in school and they got to be back by, mid-August. But what's shocking to me is the number of events that have now exist in South Florida in the last, I would say, 30 years. You have the Arts Center. So now you have Broadway coming to South Florida and to the Fort Lauderdale.
The Oren, yeah.
Yeah. So you have Broadway in South Florida. You have the Cleveland Symphony coming down in South Florida. You have a visiting artist for jazz series coming down to the Arts Center. You have the Heat and the Panthers. You have not just F1. We just had the Miami Open tennis tournament. We had the Miami Film Festival. We have the Miami Jewish Film Festival. We have Coconut Grove Arts Festival. It used to be there were like 5 events,
right.
Now you have the Music Week Ultra, and you have Tortuga that follows it. And the other thing I found interesting is because the Hard Rock has this beautiful music venue, we're now seeing year-round superstar performers coming to the Hard Rock, which we didn't really have 30 years ago.
From your perspective, from both a native perspective and a business person in South Florida, how has that reorientation to a round the calendar year orientation changed us? What ways is it impacting us, positively or negatively?
Well, negatively, I would say traffic, because getting to an event is like getting to Tortuga on a Friday night.
Is this our tee up for public transportation again?
No, I'm not going public transport. I'm going the Jetsons. I'm going Jimmy Tate's The Jetsons. Lift off,
get in the air. For those who didn't join us for our Jimmy Tate episode, please go take a look at it on YouTube or Spotify, because it an interesting perspective on the future of public transportation.
What are those machines called? Mechanical machines? What are they?
More or less flying cars. It's basically drone taxis for all intents and purposes.
Yeah, but I think they're going to be great. I just can't wait. I want to be the first guy to go above I-95 and just wave at everybody as I go by.
Interestingly enough, I was in Fort Lauderdale yesterday, and I was having lunch with some friends on the water, and right on the Intercoastal Waterway. And
were you walking on water?
Not quite. Haven't quite achieved that status yet, but saw the prolific use of the water taxis in Fort Lauderdale.
Oh yeah, well they have the canals, and they're very much a boating and water community. As much as boating in South Florida and in Miami is a big deal, although I could say a lot of it revolves around going to the sandbar on Sundays.
Well, here it's recreation.
Yeah,
Fort Lauderdale has figured out a way. It's transportation. You actually can get around using
and a lot of
boats.
People live on the water. They live on sailboats on the water. Here it's considered a nuisance. There it's considered a way of life.
And it's no wonder the boat show is the largest in the world. It is based out of Fort Lauderdale.
That's right.
It is part of the culture there. It's more ingrained.
And we also have the auto show here in Miami, and we have the boat show here. We have so many events. They really start in November, but they used to end right at Easter or before Easter. And now they're going all the way through May. And then, of course, you have the concert season in the summer. You have, is it Rolling Loud in the summer? Yep. I think that's Hard Rock Stadium. If it's still called, is it still called Hard Rock Stadium? Or that's the new name.
That is the new name.
Okay.
It changes every
So, by the way, there's a great trivia question for all of our listeners out there. Can you name all of the Joe Robbie Stadium names from Joe Robbie Stadium to Hard Rock Stadium? That's a tough one.
Was it Pro Player immediately after Joe Robbie?
It was Pro Player. Then it was Sun Life. Then I think it was Land Shark,
Dolphins,
then Dolphins,
then Hard Rock.
I
think that's where
we could have missed one. You'll have to let us know if we missed one.
I think and interestingly enough, to tie it a little bit to our guest today, I think the question of affordability always comes into play in anything we do in South Florida. In fact, I was visiting friends in Fort Lauderdale who had left Miami to buy a single family home because it was so much more affordable than it was down here. How many of the events, however, are predicated on being high income. I mean, if you're going to go to F1, if you're going to go to the Miami Open, if you're going to go to Art Basel, I mean, all of these things is really driven around a lot of culture of wealth.
I would say Art Basel, not so much, because you can get a ticket and see Picasso and Basquiat and other beautiful artworks, Anish Kapoor. You can see those artworks for $50.
Right.
Okay. F1, you're talking hundreds, if not thousands of dollars to watch a car go zoom and it's gone. If you really can see it.
We need to make a reel out of you doing that, by the way. That's actually going to be my new ringtone.
That's what it looked like when I saw it going by the back straightaway. There wasn't much to see. You're watching the TV screen the whole time.
But I think it is.
But it's a cultural event. But it's a cultural event for people who can afford to go. You get a ton of Europeans and South Americans that fly up here or fly over here just to watch F1.
But I would also challenge you, though, even around something like Art Basel, to say, you're right. You can get a $50 Art Basel ticket, but where are you parking? Where are you eating? What are events that surround it and its accessibility? And to say, we're still building, if we are, a culture of inclusivity here. And,
is it really inclusivity?
Well, I'm saying, are we down that road at all? And
I mean, those parties at night are for the rich people and the famous people, Leonardo DiCaprio and all of his associated
younger
female folk.
Right. Yes, exactly. But, look, I think when we talk to our guest today, I think, part of what the focus is saying, does it not ultimately start and stop with who can afford to live here, period?
I think it starts and stops with how can we provide the necessary services and the people to provide those services to the people who are bringing and pumping in the money into the economy. It's great to pump in all this money into the economy, into the real estate economy, into the high tech community, into construction and finance and corporate work that's coming down here. The question is, who's servicing those people? And if you can't have affordable or workforce housing in South Florida, then people are going to be driving from Homestead and west Broward County to get to work an hour and a half away. And I have said this on our podcast repeatedly. That is not sustainable. It's not feasible. It's not economically viable in the long term.
And when we talk to Salim Chraibi, who's joining us on the show, I think one of the questions is also, how is the infrastructure, the finance, and the politics of South Florida supporting that effort, if they are supporting that effort? And moreover, what that does that's beneficial to our community. When you and I spoke to the mayor of Miami-Dade County a couple of months ago, one of the points that she made that really stuck with me was the idea of both diversity in terms of relative wealth and income within our communities, not only from a demographic perspective, but even from, a physical development perspective, and saying, we don't want a city or a county just full of these monolithic condo towers that are, only for the wealthy. We also want to see that diversity get incorporated into neighborhoods in such a way that it encourages other forms of business, other forms of events, so that, again, there's more of a three-dimensional outlook on the way that this community continues to develop. Because in its current trajectory, and you and I certainly, benefit through a lot of our clients who are some of those large developers or some of those large, whether condominium associations or construction companies, the reality is it's very linear that way. It's not wildly dimensional. And so I'm interested what Salim has to say about not only the importance of some of the affordable housing planning and programming that's going on, but moreover, what that does to the community at large, not just in and of itself, not just in a vacuum.
Yeah, and I want to ask Salim about the difference between workforce and affordable housing as compared to low-income housing, which people get very nervous about low-income housing and saying, I don't want it near me. So the question is, how adverse are people to the concept of workforce housing? I'm going to ask him about Mayor Weinberg's Aventura Heroes Housing and whether or not that's a component that his developments are going to have, and what he thinks about asking other communities to pick up that kind of concept. And I'm going to ask him, one of the questions I really want to ask is, how do you get into that business? And more importantly, how do you get financing to construct these? Is it private financing? Is it public financing? Where do you find the land? I mean, land in Dade County is, and even Broward County, east of east of 95. It's not easy to find.
Well, points we've also learned is that number one, having affordable and workforce housing has a direct impact on public transportation. We know those public transportation corridors are predicated on access within a certain geographic framework to that type of housing. And I think we've begun to hear some new rumblings in the new administration regarding opportunity zone development, and whether there's going to be some reactivation of that and some of what that has brought to our area, because there's certainly opportunity zone development that's taking place.
Can you tell our listeners what opportunity zones are?
So I would like to actually, I'm going to speak to
You're
Salim.
Say that
yeah, because I want to dig a little bit, and we'll define it as well as expand on some of its virtues, and I think in the context again of this new administration of what that is. But we're going to go to a quick break right now. Welcome Salim on, talk about that and a whole lot more. You're watching Sun, Sand, and Sold, listening to Sun, Sand, and Sold.
Go Gators.
And joined as always, David Haber. I'm Josh Tellme, and we'll be right back.